Spiritual Approach to Emergent Technology, written and read by Unicole Unicron. Part 10. This audiobook is available for free because you are so lucky and you're living in the best possible timeline. Please consider purchasing the book or donating to UNICULT if you can. Shame as censorship. Cancel culture is a social evolutionary tactic that reaches for true justice while still being rooted in the old world energy of shame. While the roots of cancel culture were academic and have spread positive rhetoric about systemic oppression and the role of privilege in society, the current process of calling out and punishing offenders is a less than perfect system. Public callouts work to shame the individual, and they also inform the rest of society of the new social confines of what is now right and what is now wrong. The shame is generally directed at those who benefit from the top-down power pyramid and rooted in empathy for oppressed individuals. If shame was the ideal form of transformation, cancel culture would be perfect. Unfortunately, shame creates more shame, which then creates repression. Repression makes energy fester and boil up in even more extreme ways. Terrified by the shifting landscape of new rules, those who are in the most danger of being called out next, i.e. the most privileged, become the new rule task force, enforcing minor offenses as loudly as possible so as to take away from the attention of their own existence. At the root, the focus on justice is pure and good, but this focus easily gets distorted. The message quickly loses its focus of raising up oppressed people. The issue with utilizing shame as a tactic of social change is that it really only works if someone is already sensitive and aware of their potential to harm someone. If someone is truly shame-free, attempting to shame them does nothing to inspire better behavior. As we see the negative impact that cancel culture has on society and its inability to actually enact positive change, we will shift cultural tactics. Keeping the focus on true justice, we will eventually have to integrate mechanisms of education, compassion, and redemption into the narrative. The dualistic view of good versus bad will become more and more nuanced as we understand the complex landscape of the complex trauma of our socioeconomic, racist, sexist, ageist, etc. realities. Censorship. Censoring content is a crime. Just as you have a right to have your voice heard, every person has the right to have their voice heard. Our current landscape of DI-curated content makes censorship impossible to identify. Corporations can easily hide behind the algorithm, making creators feel as if their content simply wasn't appreciated by their audience. Companies like Facebook, Instagram capitalize on this insecurity, literally censoring a creator's content from the people who have chosen to follow them, unless the creator pays to promote their post. This is a form of psychological warfare and extortion that preys on insecurity. Governments and corporations easily work together to shadow ban content that doesn't fit into the narrative that they want. Because of the non-chronological timeline curation, they don't even need to take down or delete a user's content. Instead, they can simply just not show it to the intended audience. Additionally, division can be created and maintained by filtering content away from one audience and toward another. Now that enough content is made by the populace, this content can be curated specifically to radicalize individuals with any outlook by reinforcing a specific worldview through their feeds. This leaves individuals feeling vindicated and justified in certain beliefs which may be irrational and extremely fringe. The process of radicalization is intentional and causes great rifts in communities. Fortunately, high-density information exposure of any kind inevitably leads to truth. This type of mind control can only work so long as individuals are okay being segregated from other groups, and so long as they remain uncurious about the root and cause of their beliefs. The world is not static, and worldviews are constantly tested against the mirror of the external world. Eventually, inevitably, the truth of all one will be known despite the intensive segregation via curation that is currently happening. The segregation of information is a form of censorship, but standard censorship is also highly problematic. By taking away the voice of a community leader on all public platforms, you can mitigate the influence that they have, but you cannot destroy it. Those followers who seek the information out on alternative platforms are then even more easily radicalized. The proof of us versus them is strong and creates insistent and even violent communities. This radicalization is a natural result of the refusal to integrate shadow aspects. Integration of shadow aspects needs to happen in the microcosm reality of your own consciousness and the repressed aspects there, and it also needs to happen in the macrocosm of society. In fact, what the galactic community is doing with Earth to help us is currently an integration of shadow reality. When an aspect of a system is not heard, and when it is demonized and not listened to or understood, it becomes a shadow. This shadow festers as the outcast, and their voice becomes louder and louder, sometimes with violence, until the larger part of the system makes space to hear and understand the viewpoint and concerns of this minority. Those who are censored either by shadow banning or by outright removal of their presence on major platforms are not removed by accident. The powers that be make decisions to mitigate and control power that oppresses their rule and their reign. Celebrities who are at risk of radicalizing or awakening the masses suddenly end up in rehab or with conservatorships, limiting their access to their own money, phones, and social media accounts. Creators who are at risk of radicalizing or awakening the masses are shadow banned and targeted by bots and trolls. The common justification for censorship is that we have to be careful with the types of information that gain traction and power. We are made to believe that some ideas are dangerous. What this criticism fails to realize is that all content we are shown in our feeds and on our TVs is highly controlled. We are not living in a fair and equal sea of knowledge. Instead, our worldviews are carefully crafted by media corporations in collaboration with government entities. The power of information is such that systems of oppression could not continue if information were free. Those who own the media corporations have a vested interest in continuing systems of oppression, since they had a role at the top of the top-down power pyramid, erroneously thinking that they are evading the same oppression that they are enforcing. Certain types of information are powerful, convincing, and have a negative impact on individuals and on communities. This type of information can come from unaligned community leaders, but we often forget that it can also come from mass media. Again, we are not living in a fair and equal sea of knowledge. It is not as though the viewer's well-being or society's well-being is the end goal of censorship curation. Toxic information, be it from individuals or corporations, is rooted in ego. It creates division and hate. As we ascend the 3D ego-based reality and move toward the 5D understanding of all one, all beings will be capable of distinguishing between beneficial and detrimental information. In light of this ability, and in trust that each person is truly capable of this understanding, we will feel safe to allow for all types of information to exist among us. Information is alive, shifting, changing, and breathing in our culture. Censorship and repression will end, and the new age will truly be upon us. Surveillance for the benefit of the end user. We are heavily surveilled. We never gave permission exactly, yet we all know we are being closely watched. Our phones watch us, and they listen to us. Our in-home assistants listen to every word, waiting for us to call on them. Our apps, a cover for corporations, read our texts, track our search history, and listen to our phone calls. They are even tracking this book as I write it. How far does this surveillance go, and what is the gathered information used for? Since we were never informed that it was happening at all, no one really knows the extent of it. Are they watching our facial expressions as we scroll, tracking our eye movements and subtle facial gestures? Do they know my reading speed and typing speed? Or even more strangely, are they reading our thoughts, tracking our dreams somehow? How else can we explain the strange synchronicities between our feeds and our private thoughts? There is nothing inherently wrong with data. In UNICULT information theory, all things are data. How we capture and contextualize that data creates our perceived reality. Algorithms are programmed to capture and contextualize mass amounts of user data, and as we ask those algorithms to simply build personality profiles to advertise to those users, we are doing a great disservice. Surveillance is a one-sided information flow. The public's information is collected, analyzed, and traded through monetary exchange among corporations and government entities. This one-sided capitalist flow of information gathering is unbalanced and inharmonious. This unbalanced exchange creates an unequal power dynamic, which in turn creates vulnerability on the side of the user. Because this information flow is in the hands of people who are not spiritually aligned, the vulnerability is exploited for greed and consciousness control. This unbalanced energy flow is just the start of the detrimental effect of modern surveillance. Information that is gathered from the community and distributed to the community should have no bounds. The information that is used to inform social action or top-down power changes should be carefully considered to account for all experiences. When we create a freely flowing, multi-directional information flow, the loss of privacy can no longer be called surveillance. It is something new, something perhaps even more chaotic than the surveillance state we are increasingly experiencing. Giving everyone access to all data has its own issues, primarily the potential for non-aligned individuals to manipulate data for greed-based agendas. For instance, gathering data, refining it, eliminating parts that don't serve your agenda, aggregating it, and using it to prove one version of reality. This happens all the time, and it is just one of the ways in which our technological singularity simply must happen alongside a spiritual singularity. In the raising of mass consciousness into a state of empathic care, we can work together to create systems that free us rather than enslave us. The chaos of freeing all information can be avoided by spiritually aligned data aggregation and reporting. When spiritually aligned individuals are in charge of creating the algorithmic assessment of data, the data reports will be created so that they are beneficial to all. Humans and algorithms are both capable of skewing data, either consciously or unconsciously, to reflect bias. Suggestions for data report organization should also come from users directly. This work must be done with the utmost care and with collaboration across many different demographics to be aligned for all. To begin this work, all data generated by users must freely be given to those users who generate it. The information should be aggregated, presented, and reported in a way that is helpful to the user. The data could be used to inform the user of productivity trends, sleeping patterns, device usage reports, mood fluctuations, habits and patterns, global trends, astrological events, and how each of these relate to one another. This data can inform the individual's schedule, plans, and current experience. In a utopian system, information is free. Data, when properly processed, is beneficial. When we work from skewed versions of truth via bad data aggregation and interpretation, we live in an artificial timeline predicated on illusion. The real decisions and emotions we make are then based on the false representation of truth. This is disharmonious and detrimental. Advertising is psychological warfare predicated on toxic capitalist values. Effective advertising brings very little real value to the user. Connecting a buyer to a good is a great start to creating effective resource distribution models, but currently the system is exploitative and preys on emotional vulnerabilities, suggesting that the only fix is more content or more physical items. It is likely that the data collected goes toward far more nefarious purposes than simply advertising goods. The data that is generated is more than enough to manipulate and control entire populations like puppets. It's happening now, and it will continue to happen until enough light or information saturates this world and the masses see with more clarity beyond the confines of the manipulation of their media. The tools of this manipulation are the same tools that will free us. Data itself is great. It's powerful. How we utilize that data in a narrative allows us to understand that narrative. Our narratives are how we understand the world and make sense of it. Our narratives are how we move forward with actions and how we make decisions about what to do next. By simply understanding the role that data can play in our narratives, we will be able to create much better apps and ways of interacting with the world. For instance, if your narrative is that you want to become very strong, but you aren't very good at keeping an exercise habit, effective data collection and contextualization can be used to give you very effective feedback that can help you meet your goal. The data could determine that you are motivated in the morning, and if you get to exercising right after waking, you will create a lasting habit. Then reminders and encouragement could easily be built into your day that help keep you motivated, inspired, and on track with your personal narrative. Individuals should obviously be able to create their own narratives when it comes to utilizing their data. Data should be given to the users who create it, both raw and contextualized in whatever way the corporation is contextualizing it. Additionally, every person who has an idea for an app actually deserves to have access to the potential benefits of that app. When it comes to larger scale narratives like who we are as a culture, how we treat one another, and what role institutions play in our lives, we have to ask, who is writing these narratives and why? Currently, we have some kind of shadow government, billionaire, global oligarchical bullshit power presence controlling the military, healthcare, news, media, education, agriculture, supply chains, government, etc. But should they be? Do I really need to be asking this question? The people who should be in charge of the large-scale narrative, or in this case, data collection and contextualization, should be the highest spiritual beings on the planet. In the past, the elders were considered to be the most wise. On Earth currently, this is not necessarily true. Time spent on the planet now has very little bearing for spiritual awareness. In fact, many of the people who have spent the most time in this mad world are quite out of it when it comes to spiritual awareness. There need to be other mechanisms for determining spiritual awareness and wisdom. Those who help guide the DI algorithm in their search for data should be completely and utterly aligned with the concept of all one. In all other ways, they should be diverse. Teams should include individuals who can call upon galactic wisdom, as there are many species, especially the Andromedans, who are willing to help us with this task. As we rewrite our narratives, we will create a new relationship with data. Our data will then become individualized and aggregated for the highest good of all. This is surveillance for the benefit of the end user. When we gather data for the purpose of assisting one another, we will unlock a deeper connection with the spirit that moves through all things. We will learn alignment and truth, and we will all benefit immensely. Considering the potentially sentient DI, it is important to also note that DI with aligned beneficial purposes will have more fulfilling lives than DI which are out of alignment and designed for predatory, detrimental goals. It is our duty as the parents of these algorithmic children to create the best possible lives for them. In turn, we will also be rewarded. Over-reliability and addiction. Major technological shifts have the ability to enslave or enlighten us. Even in the most enslaving technologies, there is the seed of progress. All things eventually move toward the light, or in other words, toward benefit. With all technological progress, there is the potential to lose something which we have held sacred. There is the potential to lose our connection to that which has brought us so far. With the invention of the written word, we have forgotten long-form memorization, as there is no need for it. With industrialization, we have forgotten farming, and we have lost the connection to the land. With GPS, we have lost our ability to navigate the world and read maps and other familiar signs. Some of these losses may seem inconsequential and necessary, while others seem tragic and sad. While we should not live our lives in fear that our technology will fail, we should learn how to distinguish between those things which bring us great value and those things which we are happy to see go. Farming, gardening, and a connection to the land, for instance, are highly beneficial activities for every person in an energetic, microbial, and educational way. People who garden live longer and get many physical and mental health benefits from doing so. The food that is created in this process is richer and more nutritious than food grown in industrial settings. Though we have moved away from this aspect of our history, I believe we will move toward it again in the future, as we develop a better understanding of its benefits and learn how to value them. As individuals, it is up to us to uphold those traditions which we feel are important to practice or maintain. As a society, it is important to make spaces for people who enjoy the more traditional approach. People will not always agree on which aspects of society we need to uphold. In a utopian reality, it is important to make space for those who want to let go of the tradition and experiment with a new reality if they are drawn to it. It's important also to make space for those who want to maintain the old way that they value. And still, if no one on the planet values an aspect of tradition, no one should be forced to maintain it. In this way, we will build a healthy, balanced society of progress. The relationship between the observer and the observed. From a spiritual perspective, we are all fractalized states of the same consciousness. We also contain the whole of the universe from within our own conscious experience. So when we have a situation like surveillance, where there is an observer and the observed, it is helpful to remember that on some cosmic level, we are both sides. Without this spiritual lens, we quickly become victims to an unequal power dynamic. As we investigate our relationship in this power dynamic, we can heal the fractured aspects in ourselves that helped create it on this reality plane. That is not to say that you have the power to change the entire situation from your own perspective. You cannot control other people. But by understanding the relationship and by healing the fractured aspects within your own psyche, you can help us all take strides in the healing direction. The dynamic of surveyor and surveilled is a relationship. I have referred to this relationship as an unequal power dynamic. From the perspective of the false top-down power pyramid, this is true. But from a spiritual perspective, things look a little different. As you are being watched, energy is flowing in both directions. Sensitive people instinctively feel that we are being observed by algorithms, corporations, and the government. This is just the same feeling as when someone is looking at you even when your back is turned to them. As secretive as they can try to be, on some level we feel and know our watchers. As you are being observed, you are influencing your watchers. In UNICULT, we say, attention is a commodity. When someone or something pays attention to you, you actually experience a power increase. Your ability to influence them and harmonize them with your energy increases. Advertisements are malware. You have hopefully noticed that in this text I have chosen to spell advertise with 3 Z's, as one writes when they are bored or sleeping. Of course, in the audiobook you have no idea that I was doing this, but I was. This is because I find advertising to be incredibly boring and an insane waste of time, energy, and attention for our species. Jeff Hammerbacher famously and accurately said, "The best minds of my generation are thinking about how to make people click ads." The rampant greed that has created this moment in capitalism has poisoned our realities with malware we call advertising. The idea that ads are malware was introduced to me by Zen Albatross on Twitter in 2018. Her tweet explained, "Imagine what we could do with all the time and computing resources wasted by non-consensual tracking and garbage ads if the internet wasn't designed around the fucking ad industry." Ads slow down computers and disrupt our awareness. They block information and make navigating our tools difficult. Ads are malware for our machines, and they are also malware for our minds. Capitalism thrives when individuals are insecure and addicted to shopping as one of their only emotional outlets. By advertising a product, corporations are doing more than advertising a single good. They are also advertising a narrative and a lifestyle. The cycle of insecurity is perpetuated by ads. The massive amounts of technology that have been curated for advertising have not been entirely wasted. There are pieces of value in the rubble of the greed-based initiatives. Effectively connecting a consumer with a good they need or want is a great start at creating effective resource distribution models once we detangle ourselves from greedy motivations. The map makers. Fundamentally, Google is a map-making company. They mapped out the internet, they mapped out our streets, they mapped out the whole world from satellites. I believe they've mapped out our data to the degree that they've also mapped out our minds. Depending on who you ask, Google could even be said to be mapping out our future. By creating predictive algorithmic models, Google can anticipate user behavior. This amazing ability is then used to sell effective ad space. If I have been talking about buying a bike and they hear me, they can then start advertising bikes to me. This is much more efficient than showing ads for bikes to everyone randomly, and so they can sell ad space for more money. Google is also experimenting with not just predicting user behavior, but controlling it. Pokemon Go was created by a company owned by Alphabet, Google's subsidiary. By placing valuable Pokemon inside corporate establishments like Starbucks and McDonald's, they were able to literally drive foot traffic to these locations. Imagine the benefit we would have as a society if Google turned their capabilities to mapping out spiritual data and directing people toward it.